Carriage and discharge of cargo is the money-making part of the shipping business. Obviously, the personnel performing these duties should be trained and competent in performing the related duties and operating the equipment. All of the equipment used for lifting and towing operations should be certified and marked with its safe working load. All of the equipment used for lifting and towing operations should be inspected before and after every use. All of the equipment used for lifting and towing operations should be monitored during use for damage or distortion. The Code of Safe Working Practice for Merchant Seafarers gives details for lifting and towing operations. The deck crew are directly involved in slinging cargo. The deck crew could be directing crane operators or operating a crane. The deck crew is responsible for securing the cargo to prevent movement of the cargo when the ship is at sea. Shifting cargo often leads to irreversible ship stability problems. These have proved to be catastrophic, especially in bad weather. The slinging and securing duties involve a lot of manual handling. The Code of Safe Working Practice for Merchant Seafarers gives details for lifting and towing operations. Seafarers often carry dangerous goods. Toxicity and flammability are the main hazards. Dangerous goods carried in packages must be marked, handled, and stored as directed in the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code. When cargo is not in packages, it is carried in bulk. Bulk cargoes would be like oil in an oil tanker, or gravel in a barge. The serviceability of the ship and equipment used for loading, carriage and discharge of cargo is top priority. The personnel maintaining the ship should be trained and competent in performing maintenance duties. The steel surfaces of the ship have to be protected from corrosion in the saltwater environment. This is achieved with cleaning the surfaces and applying layers of paint. Paint and cleaners emit fumes, but these are not a major problem on an open deck. The chemical cleaning, painting, or the repair of tank coatings may involve the release of solvent vapors. Ships, even those that are not tankers, have many tanks. There are tanks named for what they carry, like freshwater tanks and fuel tanks. There are tanks named after where they are, like four-peak tanks and double-bottom tanks. Every tank on the ship has to be inspected every year. In bigger ships this involves personnel entering the tank. Entering the tanks allows us to see the condition of the tank coating and to see any damage to the structural members of the ship. When a tank has to be entered, the space should be considered to be deficient in oxygen and/or contain flammable or toxic fumes, gases, or vapors. Where possible, alternative means of working, which avoid entering the space should be found. A competent person should make an assessment of the space and a responsible officer should take charge of the operation. The potential hazards should be identified, and the space should be prepared and secured for entry. When opening the entrance to a potentially dangerous space, precautions should be taken in case pressurized or unpressurized vapor or gases are released from the space. It is for the responsible officer to decide on the basis of the risk assessment the procedures to be followed for entry into a potentially dangerous space. Where the assessment shows that there is no immediate risk to health or life but that a risk could arise during the course of the work in the space, the precautions should be taken as appropriate. Where the risk to health or life is immediate, then the additional requirements are necessary. The risk assessment should include consideration of any potential hazards associated with the particular space to be entered. It should also take into consideration dangers from neighboring or connected spaces as well as the work that has to be done within the space. A responsible officer is a person appointed to take charge of every operation where entry into a dangerous space is necessary. This officer may be the same as the competent person or another officer. No entry into a potentially dangerous space should be made until such suitably qualified persons are available. If an empty tank or other confined space has been closed for a time, the oxygen content may have been reduced owing to a number of reasons. Rusting may have occurred due to oxygen combining with steel. Oxygen-absorbing chemicals may have been present. Other spaces, that are adjacent to the tank being entered, may contain toxic vapors that could have leaked into the space. Other spaces, that are adjacent to the tank being entered, may contain flammable vapors that could have leaked into the space. There is the possibility of leakage from drums of chemicals or other packages of dangerous goods where there has been mishandling or incorrect stowage or damage due to heavy weather. The atmosphere of the space should be tested. A permit-to-work system should be used. Procedures before and during the entry should be instituted. Testing of a space should be carried out only by persons trained in the use of the equipment. Testing should be carried out before entry and at regular intervals thereafter. If possible, the testing of the atmosphere before entry should be made by remote means. If this is not possible, the person selected to enter the space to test the atmosphere should only do so in accordance with the additional precautions, which include the wearing of breathing apparatus. Where appropriate, the testing of the space should be carried out at different levels. Where necessary, any sludge or other deposit liable to give off fumes should be cleaned out. This may in itself lead to the release of gases, and precautions should be taken. The space should be thoroughly ventilated either by natural or mechanical means and then tested to ensure that all harmful gases are removed and no pockets of oxygen-deficient atmosphere remain. Compressed oxygen should not be used to ventilate any space. The space should be isolated and secured against the ingress of dangerous substances by blanking off pipelines or other openings and by closing valves. Valves should then be lashed or some other means used to indicate that they are not to be opened and notices placed on the relevant controls. The officer on watch should be informed. Where necessary, pumping operations or cargo movements should be suspended when entry is being made into a dangerous space. Some monitoring equipment is designed for personal use, purely to provide a warning against oxygen deficiency and hydrocarbon concentrations when there is a change in conditions. This should not be used as a means of determining whether a dangerous space is safe to enter. An emergency escape breathing device, EBD, is a supplied air or oxygen device, only to be used for escape from a compartment that has a hazardous atmosphere. They should not be worn by a rescuer to attempt a rescue of persons in any circumstances. EBD shall not be used to fight fires, entering oxygen-deficient voids or tanks, or worn by firefighters. In these events, a self-contained breathing apparatus, which is specifically suited for such applications, should be used. EBD is not to be used for rescue. No one should enter any dangerous space to attempt a rescue without taking suitable precautions for his own safety, since not doing so would put his own life at risk and almost certainly prevent the person he intended to rescue being brought out alive. Where the procedures listed in the previous slides have been followed and it has been established that the atmosphere in the space is or could be unsafe, then the additional requirements including the use of breathing apparatus. Although the inhalation of contaminated air is the most likely route through which harmful substances enter the body, some chemicals can be absorbed through the skin. Some of the cargoes carried in chemical tankers and gas carriers are irritant or corrosive if permitted to come into contact with the skin. The disturbance of rust, scale or sludge residues of cargoes of animal, vegetable or mineral origin, or of water that could be covering such substances may lead to the release of toxic or flammable gases.